Dozens are dead in Cairo today as the White House announces it will not immediately cut aid to Egypt. We'll have that and more right here, right now on the News Hub. Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Simon Constable. Which party should the U.S. align itself with when the dust settles? Wall Street Journal Washington Bureau Chief Jerry Seib joins us now with his take. And Jerry, another great column which you say the U.S. has a losing hand.
Well, look, if the U.S. hand is to choose between the Army and the Muslim Brotherhood, those are not the greatest choices in the world. But you look at the situation today, and that's what it feels like. You know, as you noted, the U.S. said it's not going to cut off aid to the Army, to the military government, or to the government being formed by the military because it's not calling what happened last week a coup. Meantime, Muslim Brotherhood, dozens of Muslim Brotherhood followers seem to have been shot in the streets of Cairo. So this is a pretty sterile choice, a false choice, really. And I think what the U.S. needs to do is figure out some way to create a situation here in which there's a middle ground between the Army and the Muslim Brotherhood. It's not hard to see in Egypt. All these people in the streets technically were brought out by sort of younger, more technocratic, secular, liberal Egyptians who wanted a change in government back when Hosni Mubarak was overthrown. Then they wanted another one last week when President Morsi was overthrown. But they seem to have not found their voice in the system. I think one of the goals for U.S. policy here has got to be to find a voice for those people in whatever political system emerges now.
Now, in the past, under Hosni Mubarak, you had the situation where he was saying, look, I'm the last line of defense against radical Islam, and that was a tradition for decades and decades and decades. How do you institutionally get away from that? I mean, I know institutional inertia really has a lot longer life than one would think. Isn't that part of the problem here?
I think that's absolutely right. And you're right. That was essentially the choice that Hosni Mubarak framed for the U.S. for 3 decades. He essentially said, it's me or it's Islamist extremism and chaos. I'm the last line of defense, as you say. That was good enough for 30 years to keep him in the good graces of the U.S. In the end, it wasn't enough to keep him in the good graces of the people of his own country. So I think what has to happen now is the U.S. has to use the leverage that it has with the power that exists right now, which is essentially a government that is being created by the military. I think that's an argument for keeping military aid flowing. As you know, the White House said today that's what it's going to do. I think you have to use influence with the people who have influence, and right now that's the military there. But the influence has got to be used to convince them to create a broader political process, one that also includes the Muslim Brotherhood, by the way, but that draws other voices into it, and to do this slowly and do it right this time. You know, 2 years ago when Mubarak was gone, I don't think it worked out the way anybody would have hoped. There's a chance here to do it over and to do it better, and that's what the U.S. has to push for.
And Jerry, that's very hard. I mean, my home country, Britain, it took 1,500 years to establish a solid representative government. That's a long time. We're hoping it will be a little faster here. How do you do that when there's no real tradition of it?
You know, you do it in a messy way, and that's what we're seeing right now. As you note, it's not easy. Even in this country, it took 2 decades and a couple of different constitutions before we sort of got it right. And I don't think anybody should be too impatient with the Egyptians if they didn't quite get it right or the way we would like it to see work the first time around. So I think that's not surprising they have to have another go at it. I think, though, the trick here is to find the voices in the middle of the Egyptian political spectrum and find some way to empower those people. You know, the U.S. has been trying to do this, Simon. It has been giving grants to democratic institutions in Egypt and trying to bring some of these people up. But the Morsi government cut that all off a few months ago when it essentially shut down non-government organizations, kicked out people, or tried to send them to jail for doing exactly this kind of work. Well, that's going to stop now, and the Army has to be a little more broad-minded about it.
Yeah, they got to let that in.